I will not change. The whole process is completely ridiculous. I will not go through with it.
Hello?
Who's there?
I'm the Doctor.
Oh, I don't think so, my boy. You may be a doctor, but I am the Doctor. The original, you might say. And I have come back. Yes. Yes, I have come back.
Hello?
Who's there?
Sorry. So sorry, but... Are either of you two a doctor? You trying to be funny?
That's my line!
How extraordinary, my boy.
Well, I guess one more episode won't kill anyone. Except me. And also the first Doctor's characterization. I mean, seriously! No, I'm going to go into it in the review. I'll let myself do that. But, yeah, that's an early warning to what I think of the first Doctor's characterization in this episode. It's fucking shit. But the 12th Doctor's awesome. Right, let's not waste any more time. Cue review. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review / potential rant, we'll see how things go, of the 2017 Doctor Who Christmas special and the final 12th Doctor story, as well as the final story written by Stephen Moffat, Twice Upon a Time, which is also the most recent multi-Doctor story, as it co-stars David Bradley as the first Doctor. And oh boy, was that a mistake. The plot, if you can even call it a plot, of Twice Upon a Time, and I'll explain why later, is that the 12th Doctor, has ended up at the South Pole in 1986, during the, or shortly after the events of the 1966 story, The 10th Planet, which I would get out and show you, but I'd have to stop the recording for that. So I did. So the events of this story take place after the events of The 10th Planet, which was the second story of Season 4, and the final story for the first Doctor, as played by the magnificent William Hartnell. And that story took place in 1986 at the South Pole, so the TARDIS for some reason takes the 12th Doctor back to the South Pole, where he meets his first incarnation, who also does not want to regenerate. The first Doctor, played by David Bradley, says that he doesn't want to regenerate due to the fact he has the right to live and die as himself, which sort of makes sense, but at the same time is a bit stupid considering he's a Time Lord. At least the 12th Doctor, he kind of has a reason, because he's sick of tired of losing everyone, but after the 10th Doctor went through a bit of a phase where he didn't want to go, and he didn't want to turn into the 11th Doctor, or whoever would have been the 11th Doctor, whether that been Matt Smith or anybody else, there was that phase where he just went through that a bit where he didn't want to go, and he wanted to carry on as himself. So yeah, we kind of already done that with the 10th Doctor, and both first and 12th Doctors have understandable reasons, but they're kind of acting a bit silly. Okay, 12 we can kind of relate to, but still, we've done this before. We've kind of done this type of story before. But anyway, due to the first and 12th Doctors being in the same time and place, and also neither of them wanting to regenerate, this means time gets frozen, and this complicates time, which means an operation by these people from New Earth in the year 5,000,000,012, who are taking testimony from dead people across time and space. One of the people they're collecting testimony from, a World War I captain, from a British captain, who was supposed to die in a trench on Christmas Day 1914. Not a trench, it was a bomb hole in no man's land on Christmas Day 1914, with a German soldier, both actors played by Doctor Who writing alumni Mark Gatiss and Toby Whithouse. With Mark Gatiss also being known for his acting as well. So Mark Gatiss is one of our main characters in this episode. So due to the Doctors causing this issue with time, the captain is accidentally, after getting his testimony, he is accidentally displaced in the South Pole in 1986 instead of back at where he was supposed to have died. This then begins a bit of a chase between the two Doctors and the captain and these glass people from the future in order to in order to get the captain back to when he was supposed to have died. And along the way, they offer to bring back Bill Potts, played by Pel Mackey, as a offer in exchange for the captain. So Bill then joins the two Doctors and the captain on the run from these glass people as they try to find out more about them. And they go to Rusty the Dalek from Into the Dalek to try and find out what's happening. And I had to close the window because people were making noise outside. So that's kind of the plot of Twice Upon a Time. But the thing about this episode is that there isn't really a proper threat. It's not, these glass people are not villains. They don't want the captain for a malicious scheme or an evil plan. They're being nice, actually. They just want to return him back to his time of death so that time doesn't get fucked up. And the Doctors are kind of fucking up time anyway, and that's even before the captain joins them. Not to mention, this story doesn't really have an awful lot going for it. It's basically just a bit of a chase story of the characters just running away from these glass people, going to visit Rusty, and then going back to try and sort out the mess afterwards. It's just, there's very little plot to this episode. It's a plotless episode. Although I will say that most of the good stuff from the story, it does come from just characters talking to each other. That is, well, it's also the worst stuff of the episode as well, actually. It's the best and worst part of the story, is just characters interacting with each other. It's just, there's some really good character interactions, but at the same time, there's some really bad ones, and I'll get onto those in a bit. But the main issue with Twice Upon a Time's story, not the main issue with the episode itself, but with the story, is that there's very little story there. Dimmy Looming compared it to an additional extra short scene or short minisode you'd get on the Series 5 and 6 DVDs. So like Meanwhile in the TARDIS, which were scenes taking place between the 11th Hour and the Beast Below and Flesh and Stone and Vampires of Venice. He compared this story to be like that. As this is just a story that takes place between the end of Dr. Falls and the start of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, but also throws in the regeneration at the end, so it counts as a regeneration story. So yeah, it's basically just filler. It's just Stephen Moffat, because he wanted that Christmas special slot, as I mentioned at the end of the last review. He wanted that Christmas special slot when Chris Chibnall declined to do it, and they didn't think to use the 2017 version of Shada. And he wrote this episode, and it became Capaldi's last story. They got Rachel Talani back, and they made it a multi-Doctor story with the first Doctor as Moffat's reasoning is that if you want any Doctor to meet any past Doctor, the best one is to go with the first, because the first one can then see what their future will become, which makes sense on paper. And of course, David Bradley, which I think either Capaldi or Mark Gatiss suggested, they could get David Bradley back in from An Adventure in Space and Time from 2013. On paper, this sounds really great. But what we actually get, and we'll get onto characterization later, because that is the main issue of this story, but I'll get onto that later. The thing is, this story doesn't really do much with that concept. It's just the first Doctor turns up, and because the 12th Doctor is that there at the same time, and they're both not wanting to regenerate, this whole other thing happens. But the first Doctor just doesn't really do much in the story anyway. He just dawdles, again, as Dimmy Looming mentioned in her review, he just dawdles around doing nothing. He feels more like the companion of the story rather than a Doctor. And Bill Potts feels more like a Doctor, or the Captain feels more like a Doctor than the first Doctor does. He's basically there just to be the companion. Heck, you didn't even need Bill. You could have just had the first Doctor be the companion, which doesn't sound very good, to be honest. It doesn't sound good that a past incarnation of the Doctor is the companion of the current Doctor. They're usually teaming up with each other and on a similar level. Even in Time Crash, they were on a similar level as each other. But this time around, the first Doctor just seems more like the companion, because he's asking questions and dodging around doing feck all. And that's only the bare minimum of the issues with the first Doctor in this story. But more on him later. I will say this, that the whole stuff with the Captain does kind of make sense for the story it is trying to tell. Well, the amount of story it's trying to tell. As is Bill, and you know what, Stephen Moffat made a good choice of having Bill come back through that door when he says he got about a third into the script. And in an interview, he said that when he got to that bit, he thought, you know who I'd like to see come back through those doors? I'd like to see Bill back, or something along those lines. So I think him bringing back Bill for one more episode was great, and we got some more stuff from Pearl Mackie, and she's really great. And she does sort of have a reason for being in the episode with what the plot is, what little there is of it. But at the same time, you could have taken her out, and there wouldn't have been too much of a difference. Let's talk about Bill, because it's not the real Bill. It's basically Bill's memories that have been planted into a glass person who then takes on Bill's physical appearance. So Bill is there. It's just that it's more of the memory side of her, the subconsciousness side of her. Initially this creature is in the TARDIS and it's being a little bit creepy in places. But then when we're revealed that it's not an evil plan, then the whole stuff about the glass person being creepy is just made redundant, and it's just questionable. Why didn't the glass people just tell the doctors and the captain earlier on that they're doing this instead of having to keep it secret, making themselves look like villains, and then being a bit creepy? And then after Rusty spills the beans on them, they're just openly admitting, yeah, we're doing this. We could have told you earlier, but we didn't. It's just a reason just to run away from them so that we can go and visit Rusty for no reason. I'm glad that we do see Rusty again after Series 8, but he could have easily been cut from this story. He could have been lost from the story and it wouldn't make much of a difference. And yeah, I think the whole plan of the glass people is a good plan, but they could have just told the doctors at the start that they're doing this instead of them having to go to Rusty and the glass people just being creepy and making themselves look like villains until, oh, hang on a second, they're not the villains. And that also then makes the story a little bit pointless as well, because they're not evil. I mean, you don't have to have an actual proper villain, maybe, but maybe we could have the Doctor and doctors help them out or something. You know, just don't have this red herring or whatever it was that Moffat was trying to do with them. It just doesn't work. Pearl Mackie is excellent as Bill, though. She is bloody excellent. As is Mark Gatiss as the captain. He's definitely got this stiff upper lip, British soldier person type of attitude from 1914. Mark Gatiss plays that fantastically. And also credit to Toby Whithouse for being a great German soldier as well. And also the actress playing Helen Clay does a good job as well, I suppose. We also have cameos from Clara and Nardole at the end of the story. Clara helping the Doctor regain his memories of her and proving that memories are important, with Nardole then coming in to make sure the Doctor doesn't die at the end and having a couple of funny lines. So Jenna Coleman and Matt Lucas make some great final performances at the very end of the episode. I also love that Stephen Moffat wrote a joke from Doctor Who The Fan Show into this script, that in the Doctor Who Fan Show when they were talking about the pilot, Stephen Moffat said that Nardole had invisible hair. And so he writes that line into this episode. I also love the three main character hug from Oxygen being done again in this episode. It works really well. The 12th Doctor's final couple of scenes do take up the last 10 minutes of the episode. The first Doctor's gone off to regenerate before we get to the 50-minute mark. So, yeah, the last 10 minutes are dedicated to wrapping up the 12th Doctor's era and then going off to regenerate in his big speech and everything. I'll talk more about that later, but I will say Peter Capaldi is fucking fantastic one last time in this episode, in spite of the material. Though he gets a couple of great lines, like I said, the story isn't that much. And now we get to the worst part of this episode, and this is probably the bit that's going to be a major fucking rant. Even if the whole story doesn't get a major fucking rant review, this is going to be the rant section of that review. So if this review says /rant or open brackets rant close brackets, it's like with Destiny of the Daleks, Revenge of the Cybermen, Image of the Fendel. It's probably going to be more something to do with something that's in the episode rather than the actual episode itself. Also, whilst I have seen every single story of Doctor Who, I've watched every single, missing episodes with the animations or with reconstructions, and I've seen every single Doctor. I'm still not a huge expert on the first Doctor or his era. Despite watching all of his stories, I'm still not a huge expert, especially since the last time I watched them were for these reviews, and that was back in 2018 and early 2019. So yeah, it's been a while since I've seen some first Doctor stories. I haven't even rewatched one for fun since, not yet anyways, at time recording. So So I'm not a huge expert on this, but I do recommend checking out Josh Snares' review of this story for him talking a bit more about the First Doctor and what this episode does with him, as he's more of an expert on the First Doctor due to him being his favourite Doctor. But I'll try my best to explain what's wrong with the character compared to how he is in the first 4 seasons of the classic show, the first 3 seasons and the first 2 stories of season 4. But also, I'm going to be explaining what's wrong with him just in general in the story without the context of those first 29 stories that he was in, which made up the first 3 seasons and the first 2 stories of season 4. Okay, so the First Doctor in story is played by David Bradley. Now, before getting on to characterization, I will mention David Bradley. I think he tries. To play the First Doctor, but I don't think he succeeds. I think he was slightly better at playing the First Doctor in An Adventure in Space and Time, but he was more playing William Hartnell in that story, and William Hartnell was the First Doctor. He is just the First Doctor, but I don't know whether it's him or Rachel Talali or both, or that and Stephen Moffat's script. It's definitely in the script, but whether the performance and or the directing are also contributing to this, I'm not sure, but he just isn't very good as the First Doctor. He's trying, but either his performance or the directing or both just make him just a weak interpretation of the First Doctor, and it's not capturing that sense. I think Richard Hurndell's version of the First Doctor was a bit more accurate to William Hartnell's, but even then he wasn't quite there yet. He was a bit too rough with the voice, again, as Dimi Looming mentions in a video. But this time around, David Bradley sounds a bit more soft, and neither of them really capture William Hartnell having been tough but also soft at the same time. I think Hurndell might have gotten the soft side a little bit more than Bradley does the gruff side of this character, but Hurndell is definitely a more gruffer version, whilst Bradley's a more softer version. But yeah, Bradley's just maybe either trying too hard or he's just not trying hard enough, but he does try, just maybe not enough or it's too much, and it just doesn't come across. He feels like a poor imitation of the First Doctor, which is just a shame because he was really great as William Hartnell and the First Doctor in An Adventure in Space and Time. It was really great. But when it comes to this story, I'm not sure. Maybe it was the directing. Maybe it was how Rachel Talali told him to direct. Maybe she hasn't seen so much William Hartnell. I feel if we had a director who had seen a lot of William Hartnell stories, we would have maybe a more accurate portrayal. Maybe David Bradley could go and watch a few William Hartnell stories as well. I'm not sure whether they did that or not. It just doesn't come across even remotely like the First Doctor. John Gillier, who's a voice actor, actually is able to sound a bit like the First Doctor, which is why they brought him in for the Day of the Doctor and also for the extended episodes 3 and 4 of Planet of Giants for its DVD when that came to DVD. But David Bradley just doesn't quite fit. I mean, he looks like William Hartnell. He looks like the First Doctor in the costume and with the wig or the hair that they do with him. He definitely looks the part, but it's the voice that doesn't quite match, which is then begs the question why Big Finish gave him a couple box sets. But maybe his voice is better in those. Maybe he doesn't have to try as hard. Maybe the Big Finish directors actually know what they're doing. I'm not sure. I have heard an episode of one of them, not a story, a single episode, and all the characters sound posh for some reason. They seem to be making the same mistake as this story. They're coming from the 1960s. They have to act like they're from the 1960s when... Okay, maybe in the Big Finish's case, that makes sense. But in this story, the First Doctor has a couple of attitudes which are supposedly stuff from the 1960s, but it doesn't work for the First Doctor. So here we go, the big rant section of the review. The First Doctor is written to be a sexist in this episode. Why? Why? The First Doctor was not a sexist in the original series. Maybe there might have been the odd comment every now and again, but that would have been the writer's fault, not the character. The First Doctor is accepting all species. See Galaxy 4, where he basically just says doesn't matter what the rules look like, so long as they're intelligent species. And in Big Finish, again, they do, I think it's the series called The Early Adventures, they do some audio stories with the First Doctor and Stephen meeting this gay character, and they don't give a fuck that he's gay. Stephen's too far into the future to care, and the Doctor's from another bloody planet! Which also ties in with what the 12th Doctor said in Wealth Enough in Time to do with genders, which I think a lot of people forgot about when they announced the 13th Doctor. But we won't talk about that now. In fact, this characterization of the First Doctor basically goes against what that sentence was in The World Enough in Time that the 12th Doctor said. The First Doctor is just made to be a sexist just because he hung out in the 1960s a lot. That's about it. That's Stephen Moffat's reasoning, because he's from the 1960s, so he's going to have some sexist issues. But my God, why? The First Doctor, as Dimmy Looming mentions in her review, was nothing like this. They were kind, they were open, they were accepting. Yeah, there might have been the odd comment here and there, but that would have been due to the writers. So, and not just for sexism, also for some racism. In fact, there's a pretty obvious one in episode 7 of Dalek's Master Plan. But besides the odd comments, the First Doctor was accepting of most, if not all, species. And as time went on, he mellowed and became more of a nicer character. He was quite a fun character towards the end of season 3. He got on really well with the younger characters in the War Machines. And yeah, he was just a great guy. He was just a great guy to be around once he started to mellow over time. A bit like the 6th and 12th Doctors, come to think of it. But the First Doctor here, he is a big sexist bigot for literally no reason. And yeah, and he makes some really terrible comments. The worst comments aren't all ladies made of glass, and if I hear any more language like that, young lady, I'm going to give you a jolly good smack bottom lines. The first one is just terrible, and the second one is trying to be a reference to the Dalek invasion of Earth, but there's a difference between giving your granddaughter a smack bottom for getting herself injured in a dangerous place and giving a stranger a smack bottom for saying some curse words. It's so bad. And also there's some weird bits about saying that the 12th Doctor is his nurse, which is improbable because he's a man. So basically, in the 1960s, all nurses were women, and all doctors, or most doctors, were men. But of course, times changed since then. By 2010, you'd have male nurses, see Rory, and female doctors, see Dr. Amsterdam, in that same episode, the 11th hour. But yeah, even before that. But yeah, because I suppose that one does kind of tie in with the fact that the First Doctor ties in with the hangs out in the 1960s as much, but again, he travels in time and space. He probably knows stuff from the future that haven't happened at the time of the present day he hangs out. Look at the modern series Doctors. Even if they hang out in the present day, they still know about stuff from far off into the future. So him hanging out in the 1960s wouldn't stand as an excuse, but it would be the best excuse, because anything else, I have no idea why. And then he says that the TARDIS is in dire need of a clean, and that Polly's still not around. Poor Polly. I mean, she wasn't the best character in the show, but she didn't deserve slander like that. Also, the Doctor has some brandy in the cupboard, which I personally wouldn't mind, but apparently the First Doctor didn't drink, as Josh Snez explained and uses a clip from The Gunfighters to explain it. Though he did smoke in An Unearthly Child, but that kind of died down later on. The Doctor stopped smoking his pipe after that story, so after that, I don't think the Doctor smoked. Not on screen anyway, which makes sense because this is a family show. So yeah, I don't get it. Why did Stephen Moffat make the First Doctor a sexist? Just because he's from the 1960s doesn't mean he has to be a fucking sexist. It's a massive misinterpretation of the First Doctor, and that's not even including the other misunderstandings of the First Doctor. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of the First Doctor in the story, but by far the biggest is the fact that he's been turned into a sexist bigot, blubbering about women every other couple minutes. He even finds Bill being a lesbian quite shocking. Like I said in the Big Finish audios with Stephen and this gay companion who travels them with a few stories, he doesn't care because he's a fucking alien from another fucking planet. But here, because he's a sexist bigot, he's like the captain, he finds Bill's being a lesbian kind of shocking. If this was Ben and Polly, it'd still be bad, but it wouldn't be as bad, but because they are from the 1960s, but the Doctor, just any Doctor would not do this. Not even the First Doctor. In the First Doctor, as mentioned, he was a kind, open, loving character, especially as the show went on. Here, he is a complete opposite to what he was like in those first 3 seasons and the first 2 stories of season 4. This is a complete misunderstanding of the First Doctor. Stephen Moffat does not get the First Doctor. I'm sorry, but, he's a classic fan, but he doesn't get the First Doctor. Or at least he completely misses the mark with telling him this time round. And I do think part of that is partly down to David Bradley and Rachel Talalay with the acting and the directing. But even if they were spot on point, or if William Hartnell had somehow been resurrected to come back, The characterization is shit. And also he has hardly anything to do. So the First Doctor is, honestly, he's just there to make this a multi-Doctor story, and that's it. And yeah, this story didn't need the First Doctor. You could have just had the cat. Maybe something went wrong with the aliens' machines, so the 12th Doctor teams up with them to help get the captain back home, but first they go on a bit of an adventure first or something. Or have that idea that some people theorise there might be the plot of the Christmas special, where the 12th Doctor and the First Doctor teamed up to go and save Gallifrey, see Dave the Doctor. And that would have helped tie in with where the 12th Doctor comes in with all of that, as we see in that episode. I guess that fan edit of the 12th Doctor immediately going back to save Gallifrey during that time, just after the regeneration in the Time of the Doctor, before then crashing into the dinosaur, and then take that to Victorian London, see Deep Breath, counts as canon now. Well, it's more canon than this episode, and this episode's canon, as some people might wish it not to be. So, yeah, that fan edit of 12 going to join the Saving Gallifrey segment just after the regeneration, that's officially canon in my books, because we're going to put it somewhere. And this episode didn't do it, considering they could have done that. So, yeah. Yes, fan edits can be canon, if they fit. In alternative universes, fan edits of 12th Doctor's regeneration at the end of the Doctor Falls would be more canon than this episode. So, yeah, this episode isn't very good. I will say that on a positive side, it is visually good looking, and there's some good stuff, and Bridget Talley does some good direction again, apart from the First Doctor's performance. But again, that could be a mix between that and or David Bradley, as well as the terrible script, because the script does the First Doctor the complete opposite of justice. It does it anti-justice. Well done, Stephen Moffat. Just fucking well done. So yeah, it does look like a pretty good episode on visual level, for the most part. Although, strangely, that TARDIS console room, I apparently heard that one is a less accurate First Doctor console room than the Hellbent one was. Okay. And yeah, it does have some good visuals and some good music by Murray Gold, who basically does, like with Dave the Doctor, it's basically an updated version of his best hits of music that was used in previous episodes, especially some of the RTD ones. We get a couple tracks like the Doctor's theme and Veil used in this story. But yeah, also I Am the Doctor plays at the bit where the 12th Doctor is announcing his plan to the his escape plan to the Glass People, which is odd because A, that's Matt Smith's theme, and B, Peter Capaldi's got his own theme that could easily have been played at that segment, unless I'm just mishearing it. So yeah, there's some good visual stuff and some good performances. Not everyone though, and there's some good directing, and I know everyone did care about delivering a great final story for the 12th Doctor, but unfortunately, the story just doesn't have that. There isn't that much of a story to it, and it doesn't really give the other characters that much justice, especially the First Doctor. Though, I just remember there is one more thing to talk about before we get to the end, and that is probably what is the best scene of the episode. The Christmas Armistice scene, which is a great idea. It's an idea no one's actually done in Doctor Who before. So this is actually a great scene, and it works really well, and this is really nice when the Doctor takes the captain back a few hours later to when he was initially to die, and they arrive just in time for the Christmas Armistice to start. And it's a really lovely scene where the British and German armies put down their guns and just have a bit of hang out with each other for a day. It's such a beautiful scene, and possibly a potential greatest scene of Doctor Who ever. But yeah, it's just a shame it's lumbered with the rest of the story, where there was so little going on before this, and it is definitely the best scene by a long shot, and it feels like it's in a different episode. But thankfully there is some silver linings to this story, like this scene. It's a powerful, great scene, and I do like the captain being a relation to Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. Apparently, according to Mark Gatiss, it's actually his granddad, his grandfather, so one of his boys that he mentions in this story will grow up to be the father of Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. We also have some nice edits of, at the opening and towards the end, of scenes from the 10th Planet. We get some archive footage which shows William Hartnell, Michael Cranes, and Annika Willis as the Doctor, Ben, and Polly, as well as the regeneration scene from Hartnell into Troughton, as well as a few scenes at the start of this episode that recreate scenes from the 10th Planet, but with David Bradley and the two new actors brought in to play Ben and Polly. I even remember, I think I tweeted or commented a tweet on how that I liked the performance of, I believe it was the actress playing Polly. But whilst the actor playing Ben and the actress playing Polly in the new film segments for this episode, they do a good job with their roles. But unfortunately, they're not there for very long. They're only there for a bit at the start. There's a few deleted scenes from that start as well, with a few a little bit more scene recreations, including a Mondasian Cyberman, the costume they used from the series 10 finale. However, and we do see a bit of this in this episode. However, it's over a bit quickly. Also, we've got some strange text about a long time ago. The Doctor refused at the South Pole. The Doctor refused to regenerate twice. So it seems like a bit pointless having all the stuff from the 10th planet, the scene recreations and the archive footage, and then you've got that text at the start. It doesn't feel that needed. I will say this: the Doctor's lines saying, "Here we go, the long way round," are better final lines for the first Doctor than over. No, it's far from being all over. Although those were great foreshadowing and tease lines about what was happening. I think he does go and collect Ben and Polly at the end, which is a good thing, but we don't really see them enter the TARDIS, either the new actors or archive footage of the older actors as the characters. But I am glad that we do get to see the regeneration into Patrick Troughton. It's quite funny that this story only came out a few years after this story, The 10th Planet, came out on DVD, and also a year after The Power of the Daleks got animated. I'm showing off the Steelbook, by the way, because it's right next to me, and I couldn't be bothered to move all my boxes to get out the DVD again. Maybe I should have done that when I got the 10th Planet DVD out. But yeah, so there's a few nice bits in this story, but there's a few bits it doesn't quite handle that well. Right, so the final 10 minutes, that's all focusing on the 12th Doctor, with Bill and Clara and Nardal, the Glass People coming back as them to give him some memories, and then the last 5 minutes are basically the 12th Doctor's big grand speech, and he's about to regenerate. Shepherd's Boy blaring, it's a fantastic track to go alongside the 12th Doctor. His final speech is a bit odd. He has some strange things, like he references Never Eat Pears, which I think he also said in Hellbent. Both mentions are in reference to deleted scenes from Human Nature, for some reason. The Neville Cruel or Cowardly bit is good, and the Love Hard, Stay Strong bit, but then he says that nobody can hear his name except children, and that's apparently due to Capaldi wanting the fact that he was talking to a kid fan and he said only children can hear the Doctor's name, so he wanted this in the script, that only children can hear the Doctor's name. I mean, it's nice, but it's not necessary. The Doctor's final line is pretty great. Doctor, I let you go. That is a great last couple words for the 12th Doctor before he regenerates in what is probably the worst new series regeneration effect. And for some reason, this also causes the TARDIS to explode. Maybe it's because he's keeping it in so long, like with the 10th Doctor. But yeah, and then the TARDIS basically just explodes at the end of the episode. Though that bit I can blame on Chris Chibnall rather than Stephen Moffat. But I'll get on to that in a second. So the 12th Doctor regenerates, and that's it for the 12th Doctor. That's Peter Capaldi's tenure. So I'd like to raise a toast, as I have left, to Peter Capaldi. You were fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I'll be doing another one of these in the ranking and Series 10 ranking, and one more in the top 10 12th Doctor rankings. But Peter Capaldi, thank you for being the 12th Doctor. The regeneration scene was probably the weakest of the new series. And the regeneration effect was definitely the weakest of the new series. So I'm going to do the score and the wrap up before we get on to the 13th Doctor's first scene. Okay, so Twice Upon a Time, this is easily the weakest regeneration story for a modern Doctor, and after Time in the Rani, for any Doctor, it's the weakest one. Heck, if Count Brink of Death is the regeneration story instead of Time in the Rani for the 6th Doctor, then this is indeed the weakest one. When it focuses on the 12th Doctor, it's not so bad, but other characters are done less justice. The first Doctor is completely unrecognisable characteristic-wise and also voice-wise to what he was like in the original series. Yeah, he was William Hartnell back then, and this is David Bradley. It's a different actor, but characterization, he is very different. He's like an alternative First Doctor, as opposed to a new actor taking up the role as the First Doctor. But that's mainly due to the writing, but the acting and the directing don't quite match up with what the First Doctor was like in the original series anyway. Honestly, I think they would have gotten a better First Doctor if they got Geraldine McEwen's Miss Marple into this episode. Bill and the Captain are a bit better, but they're still just there, just because. And the plot is not very good. It's not really much of a plot. Whilst the scenes towards the end with the Christmas armistice are amazing. Other parts of this story aren't very needed, and they're just there. It looks great on a visual level, and Peter Capaldi does a fantastic job directing, apart from when the First Doctor's characterization is concerned. But like with Dark Water, Death in Heaven, and Hellbent, fantastic visuals doesn't say the story. Ultimately, the story comes down to a mixed bag. There's a couple of good stuff, there's a couple of enjoyment stuff, but then you've got some really bad moments, and it's just, it doesn't work. This is one of the weakest episodes of the Revised series, and it's one of the weakest, if not the weakest, multi-Doctor stories. I initially gave this one a 7 out of 10 upon original viewing, but over time it has gone down in opinion, especially when thinking about it. I had listed it as a 5 before rewatching it. It stayed a 5, but after talking about it, I will be giving Twice Upon a Time a disappointing 4 out of 10. Even though I thought 5 when we were watching it, because there were some fun moments when watching it, but talking about it, no, it's a 4 because it does more things wrong than right. It's it doesn't quite work, but there are a few great stuff like the Christmas armistice stuff. Capaldi is fucking awesome one last time, and it's nicely visualized. And there's some good stuff in there, and Murray Gold's music is still pretty nice. But there's a lot of problems with it. The First Doctor is completely unrecognisable, both not just because he's played by another actor, but because his characteristics are so wildly different, and he is a sexist bigot for no reason. And that is the worst part of this story. Bill and the Captain are good, but the story that is surrounding them just isn't that necessary. It doesn't really need to be there. They visit Rusty just because, and the Glass people just they don't tell the Doctors their plan for no reason. They keep it a secret for no reason, even though the Doctors would probably have helped them if they just told them the plan. It's just a very weak ending to the 12th Doctor's era. It's a weak ending to Stephen Moffat's era. As I mentioned, it's the weakest regeneration story. If you take out Time in the Rani and replace it with Brink of Death, it is the weakest regeneration story. And it's just ultimately a pretty weak end overall. And it's the last episode of the show for just over 9 months until Series 11 starts broadcasting at the start of October of 2018. I say just over 9 months because this episode aired on Christmas Day, 2017. That would have been the 25th of January. Series 11 started on the 6th of October, so it'd be about 9.5 or just under months. So yeah, it's the last episode until early October 2018. So there's a massive gap between this and the first 13th Doctor story, and yeah, it doesn't really leave a good taste in the mouth, and it's a bad way to wrap up these eras, unfortunately, and also the series that preceded it. It's such a shame because Capaldi was amazing and he deserves better, and we had better. We had a better regeneration story with the last episode. The last 2 episodes, but because Moffat wanted to keep that Christmas Day slot, we got this. Maybe Chris Chibnall should have made The Woman Who Fell to Earth a Christmas episode and then added an extra episode to Series 11 and just had the cliffhanger be what the audience would be holding their breath waiting for 9.5 months till the series kickstarted. And then maybe we could have another episode by another guest writer, perhaps, because Chibnall writes too many episodes of Series 11. But more on that when we get to those. Or, as I mentioned in the last review, split the 2017 version of Sharda into 2 and aired them on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Seriously, the fans would love it, and it would make Sharda an official televised story. Heck, you could even consider it a new series story if you wanted to, even though it's a classic one, but it's broadcast in the new series block. Regardless, it would make Sharda count as an official television story. But no, BBC America aired it, but it doesn't really count as an official television story. So, not unless it got broadcast on BBC One. So yeah, this would have been the perfect opportunity to do that, but nope, they might not have known about it, which is fair, but you know, the opportunity is right there. The stars are aligning. You could have done that, and it would have been awesome. But no, we got Twice Upon a Time. Great. So that's it from Twice Upon a Time. But before we finish this review, one more scene to talk about, and that's the 13th Doctor's introduction scene, which is actually written by Chris Chibnall, like how the 11th Doctor's first scene in The End of Time Part 2 was written by Stephen Moffat. Right, I like how the 13th Doctor is introduced with the way it's building up to the reveal. And Julie has one line to do and a couple of expressions, but yeah, she does a good job with the first scene, and then the TARDIS just blows up. Yeah. This has been a thing for the last 3 Doctors. After the 9th Doctor regenerated, the 10th Doctor wasn't able to steer the TARDIS very well, as see Born Again and the Christmas Invasion. And then, End of Time, TARDIS blew up so that we could get a new TARDIS in the 11th hour. And then Twice Upon a Time, the TARDIS just crashed just because it just decided it wanted to go and crash into a dinosaur for no reason. It got a bit of an update in Deep Breath as well, but... and now we've got the TARDIS explode here, just so that we can get a new TARDIS in the Ghost Monument, which gets an update in Spyfall, but not as obvious as the Deep Breath one. But yeah, the TARDIS just blows up. I will say this though, like with the 11th hour, the TARDIS rebuilding itself does tie into the plots that Chris Chibnall wants to write with The Woman Who Fell to Earth and the Ghost Monument. That does tie in nicely, but at the same time, this is the 4th regeneration that causes the TARDIS to go out of control or to blow up or just to crash land or something. It's the 4th one. We've got to stop doing this. I think Council Geeks made a video of this as well. They were complaining about it, this cliche. So, yeah, 13th Doctor into 14th Doctor regeneration. Chris Chibnall, please don't make the TARDIS go out of control. Even if you're going to update the TARDIS interior and exterior, if you're going to update the TARDIS, just don't have it crash or blow up or anything. We've done it 4 times in a row. But as the episode ends, the 13th Doctor falls to Earth. Hence the title of the next episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Although that to be continued at the end could have been removed. You didn't really need that. But anyway, so that's Twice Upon a Time. What a disappointing end to the 12th Doctor's era. And what a disappointing end to Series 10. Thank goodness for that fantastic finale being as fantastic as it was. So thank you for watching this review. Tune in tomorrow for my Series 10 ranking, where I'll rank every single episode from Return of Doctor Mysterio to Twice Upon a Time. And then after that, it will be the top 10 12th Doctor stories. And then we'll be done with the 12th Doctor stuff. And then a few days later, we will begin the 13th Doctor reviews, starting with The Woman Who Fell to Earth, the first episode of Series 11. Or rather, the Revisitation reviews. Unlike with Series 10, Series 11 and 12 will be getting Revisitation reviews. Original reviews are currently up to check out now, if you so wish. But those are opinions from 2016, 17 and 18 for Series 10, 2018 and 19 for Series 11, and 2020, and also January 2021 for Series 12. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you guys next time for the Series 10 ranking, then the top 10 12th Doctor stories ranking, and then for the Series 11 reviews, starting with The Woman Who Fell to Earth a few days later. Thank you for watching. See you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.